All right, so for my book reflection, my fourth book reflection, we are continuing with the final installment, or at least the final installment I'll be reading, of the Mysterious Benedict Society series, The Extraordinary Education of Nicholas Benedict. And I must say, this is probably my favorite of the four books. As we all know, it's the prequel. And if you're new to this channel or the series, spoilers ahead, I'm more so not giving a summary or analysis of the book, but just giving my thoughts and reflections. So this is probably one of the most entertaining of the four, even though it's the prequel, and also one of the most, interesting in terms of the messages. So we see in the first three books that one of the continuous themes is like evil and good versus evil. In this book, it still is, good versus evil, but it's more so a case study of selfishness. And so I'm going to kind of go through this book a little differently than I have with the previous books. I'm still relying on some of my commonplace notebook notes, but I'm kind of going to work backwards. I'm going to try working backwards with this one. So the thing about this book is there's this huge buildup to where Nicholas kind of runs away from the manor, as we know, and he meets I think his name is Sam Harrencourt, right? The man on the train. And this is the first time that Nicholas comes across somebody who is, just a normal good guy. The chapter is the kindness of strangers, right? And it's sort of like I don't know if Trenton Lee is alluding to A Streetcar Named Desire, I think, or that play where at the end the main character, the girl, she says, "I've always relied on the kindness of strangers." I don't know if he's alluding to that, but we clearly see Samuel Harrington, right? And this is the first time Nicholas is coming across someone who is just decent, who's just, is just treating him with respect and looking out for him and taking care of him, even though he is very observant himself. He's an ex-military guy. And so we kind of see how, when Nicholas is in this book, and I don't remember the exact page, but, you've read it, he's going over the Rothschild's diary, and he's like saying, like, there's no way that Mr. Rothschild, writing about his wife, that she was really like that she was really all loving and all caring, and very thoughtful and took heed of everybody, despite the fact that he was finding out later in the book that people like Mr. Furrow, the farmer, even testified to her kindness and whatnot. And that's when he started gathering the evidence to actually believe that there are people out there that are good, that have no ulterior motive, that just want to help. And that's why, we see at the end where Nicholas is kind of overthinking in his interaction with Samuel, or with Sam Harrington, like, what does he want in return for what I want? And that's the thing, is I when I read that, it just kind of like went right through me, and I was like, yeah, that's what kids who go through abuse, whether it's sexual abuse or neglect or just not being cared or loved by anyone, that's what goes through their heads is, why is this person being so nice to me? What do they want in return? Right? And Nicholas learns that there's some people that just do things without anything in return. Nicholas, in fact, does this himself in the book before he realizes his selfishness. For example, in the scene where Gertrude is hanging by the chandelier, right? And he says, and Trenton Lee writes that he stood up against the spiders, right, the bullies, and made it, and kind of rescued Gertrude, but then he turned away and didn't even think of Gertrude, and didn't even turn behind his back, because he just assumed that she wasn't going to be, thankful, because nobody wants to talk to him, nobody wants to associate with him. And we see sort of, as the book continues, we see with characters like Vern, and Gertrude herself, and also Oliver, that there are people that want to look out for him. There are other kids, other orphans that want to look out for him, but he doesn't register the sacrifice and the risk they made. I mean, he did say, there was that one line where he's like, at least somebody around here has a conscience, when that was referring to, I think, Vern or Oliver. But there's this huge buildup in the book, and then you have the climax where at the end, Nicholas realizes how selfish he was in terms of his thinking, right? He even starts to see that, we start to see him consciously admit this, right? When Violet, wants to go to art school, he's in the back of his mind, he's like, yeah, I want her to go to art school, but I really don't want her to go to art school because she's my friend, and that means she's going to go away from me, right? And even though I want to convince her to follow her dreams, I also kind of want her with me, and that's one thing that I myself, that I deal with, is I want, my friends, or maybe there's a girl in my life or something like that, or a good close friend of mine, and I want them to do well, and I want them to follow their dreams, and I want them, but if it means like doing that at the expense of being able to spend time with me or reaching out to me, then I kind of don't want it. You know what I mean? Because I want to be with them, and I enjoy their company and their presence, and it's just heartbreaking, But at the same time, it's like I have to just man up and just, they're gonna live their life and do what they want to do, and so that's something I currently struggle with. I have a good friend right now. I've known him for a long time, and he's finally found his thing. He's found his calling, his vocation, however you want to put it, his career. And I it's harder and harder to reach out to him and talk to him and spend time with him, and that's okay. You know what I mean? And in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, I wish, I kind of wish back for the old days when we could just talk all the time. You know what I mean? But now it's like, I'm happy for him. I'm happy. I am truly happy, but I am conflicted because it's like, now he's not with me. Now he's not talking to me. So that was really relatable when Nicholas was kind of going through in his mind when it came to John being adopted. Like, what a great thing for John. He's adopted. He's got parents. He's got family now. He's got people who love him. But Nicholas is kind of bitter inside because now he doesn't have John for himself. And I honestly, Nicholas's situation is much more desperate than mine. John and Violet are his only companions. They're the only people in the world that care for him. You know what I mean? So he's more valid in his wanting them to be with him. But it is the same idea, right? So we see this buildup where Nicholas realizes what has happened, and Trenton Lee doesn't write it specifically till later. He says it was happiness amplified by hope, not just for himself but for people in general, and anchored by something else, something he had yet to put his finger on. Mr. Harrington was real. There were adults in the world who would actually make sacrifices for the sake of others, not just for their own families, but for anyone who needed help. Nicholas had always had the impression that families looked after one another, and he had come to understand that on rare occasions, children would do the same. Had not John made a sacrifice for his sake, right? But this was different. What Mr. Harrington was doing certainly helped Nicholas, but also simply felt right to Nicholas. It made him want to be exactly like Mr. Harrington himself, right? And we see how in the prequels, Mr. Benedict is a role model for Rini, and Rini wants to be like Mr. Benedict, and he can't think of anyone else braver or more, morally respectable, right? And we see the same model, we see the same setup for Nicholas in relation to Sam Harrington. And then this is the key paragraph of the book in terms of the message. No sooner Nicholas thought this than he realized what was anchoring his happiness. It was purpose. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew the way he thought things should be. And Mr. Harrington was proving that other people, even adults, could feel the same way. Nicholas had something to aim for now. He might not know what he wanted to be when he grew up, but he knew with absolute certainty how he wanted to be. And this is exactly what I'm going through. I want to be a teacher, but I might not be, or I might not have that intense calling, but I know that I want to maintain my character. I want to maintain my dignity. I want to maintain my level of wanting to give to other people and sacrifice at my own expense, because feeding my own selfish desire just increases my anxiety. It just makes things worse for me. And there's like no, direction to other people. And that's what really we find, when we get older, it's not about what we want, it's about what others want. And what we get in return is gratification for ourselves, internal gratification that we've made a difference in other people's lives, even if they don't give it to us. So we see Nicholas struggle with this, right? And I struggled this with myself earlier in the book, right? And I have notes on this, but for sake of time, I really don't want to get into it too specifically. But we see that, yeah, Nicholas is doing things even if nobody thanks him for it afterwards, right? Like with Gertrude, right? He's just turning his back, and Trenton, I think, writes there that Gertrude gave her a look of gratitude, but she didn't dare speak to him, right? Because everyone was trying to separate themselves from him because of his sleep and his weird antics and stuff, and he just internalized that, you know. And so yeah, I also love. There's so many things I love about this book, and I'm gonna try and condense it. The lesson then comes in where he's reflecting on all these people, right? He's reflecting on Vern sneaking up to give him a note saying he's sorry, and Oliver taking the risk to tell him something important just to be decent, right? He said thanks, but he didn't look at him. He didn't acknowledge him. He didn't get to it, right? And then the whole sort of lesson, this is sort of set up a little like Lord of the Flies, right? With Lord of the Flies, it's always, well, what's the Lord? What's the monster on the island, right? And it's the boy's like inner depravity and stuff, right? And we see in this book, what's the treasure, right? Nicholas is constantly searching after the treasure, right? The inheritance of the Rothschilds, right? And thinking it's going to solve all of his problems. And then we find out the treasure is this like nugget of wisdom he learns that what's worth more than gold, what's worth more than the Rothschilds' inheritance and all the things he could buy with that freedom, is this idea that there's not just joy and purpose, but joy in giving to others and sacrificing for others out of love, right? Very, and he says, and this treasure, this ridiculous treasure, I've put all this thought into finding the treasure and having it solve all my problems. But what about Violet's problems? What about John's problems? What about all the other kids? He's not focused, right? And we see this kind of throughout the book. He does allude a little, when John comes in, he says, oh, well, John, you and I will be able to eat ice cream all day and listen to the radio and whatnot. But, and so there's a little bit where he is thinking a little bit, but he's thinking more so how it would feel for him and not how it'd feel for John and not how it'd feel for Violet. He might impose a joy of eating ice cream and listening to the radio and doing all these things, that, again, I'm not going to look for the specific page right now, but, that paragraph where Trenton Lee writes about, all the things they're going to do when they find the treasure, that those are things that could be beneficial for John, but he's not really focused on John, right? Because John, what would bring him joy is to feel love again, because there's this whole discussion in this book, this I may have the page number for where is it better to this is like in the 220s and whatnot and a little before the early 200s, is it better to have had parents and then not have them anymore or not have them at all, right? And so Nicholas's situation's like Reenie's. He never had parents, so he doesn't know what it feels like. He doesn't know what it feels like to be loved or cared for. And then you have John, who's like Sticky, except John's parents died, Sticky's parents abandoned him, as we know. But it's the same parallel, right? Rainey and Sticky are best friends. John and Nicholas are best friends. And John had parents and lost them, and he wants them back again. And so when Nicholas is thinking about this treasure, all those things he thought about that would make him feel good, and he's imposing that on John, he's not thinking about what would really make John feel good, which is having parents, having people in that role who love him and care for him the way he had before, right? That would really solve John's issues and John's problems. And that's what Trenton Lee's referring to when he asks these questions at the end on page 413. I do have the page here. And Violet's problems, right? Violet's problems of wanting to go to art school, right? Which he doesn't really address as much in terms of the treasure solving. He does say, if we solve this treasure, you'll be able to do all these things. But he's not thinking about it in the way that Violet would be thinking about it. He's thinking about it in the way he would be thinking about it. So it's like a deeper layer that Trenton Lee is sort of exposing about. It's not just, what we wish for other people that we impose on, but actually thinking about how those other people would think about the things that would benefit them when he says this, right? And then also, what about all the other kids? What about the orphanage, right? He has this idea that the treasure is going to help him escape from the orphanage, but what about all these other kids who are all the girls who can't sleep at night? And so we see then a buildup, a really crazy, a really amazing buildup. But the next page is also just so noteworthy, quote-worthy, where he says, "I'm ashamed when I think of the sacrifices that Violet made, like telling her parents she didn't really want to go to art school anymore because she'd rather help her parents out, and because how much she loves her parents, and this contrasts with the lack of parents that Nicholas and John have. Violet has parents, and she's so grateful for them that and she's so moved by indirectly. We don't see this as much, with Violet's inner monologue as we do with Nicholas and John. But Violet is, I think, just as moved as we are. For example, there's the speech that John gives, right? It's not a speech; it's like a monologue. On page 228, 229, when he's talking about, when I was doing chores and I was with my parents, how much I'd relish that again, even though I hated doing chores. My parents were in the room, or my parents had me do them, and I was in a house with parents who loved and cared for me, right? That whole thing. Let's see. That's on. Let me read that real quick here. That's on page 228, 229. Yeah, where he says, I lost my parents exactly 14 months and 5 days ago. I miss them every day. What really gets me is I never realized how lucky I was when I had my parents before. Just normal things like doing chores around the house. I had no idea how much I can miss that, but it was my home and I was helping people who actually cared about me. Everything was different, right? So those are the things that John would want back, right? And we see he gets them. We see that John's dreams are actually fulfilled and John gets adopted. And he and Mr. Collum actually both hide that from Nicholas, right? There's the letter, of course, that the spiders burn. But this whole setup of the treasure being not the inheritance of the Rothschilds, but what Nicholas actually finds brings him joy, brings him into his own. And we see this build up all the way to page 414. I care about you, right? But, I care about you, but until recently, it never occurred to me to make a sacrifice for you. So loving others is about making sacrifices at our own expense for that person. Very biblical, right? But this is just a kid's book, and it's not biblical references or anything, but of course that's the journey I'm on, reading through the New Testament and reading through the Old again and trying to come to Christianity, me personally. But even aside from that, if you're just reading this, it's sort of a universal thing. And it's amazing how Trenton's able to weave this into a kid's novel, that loving others and caring for others means sacrificing yourself for them. Maybe not completely. That's what Christianity does, like sacrificing our whole self, but making sacrifices for others. And so it says that for Nicholas, it never occurred to him to make a sacrifice for the characters. And I think that's the message here of the whole book. And we see that again, he's kind of only thinking about himself, only thinking about what benefits him, not thinking about what could benefit his friends in their shoes, thinking about it in their shoes. And then we see, now this is really deep. This is what I really love. So first off, we see that a paragraph down, we see something in me couldn't think about what I could do for you, not if it meant losing you. And so I kind of confirm what I said earlier. Nicholas is upset, and he's admitting to Violet that if they found the treasure, if she went to art school, that she wouldn't be with him anymore, and that would make him feel bad, right? And I'm the same way, right? And Nicholas said, I wanted you both to be happy, but not if it meant losing you, right? Not like I wanted both of you to be happy. So we see that discussion again, similar to me, right? Where there's people who are going on and they're building families and careers and lifestyles, and it's good for them because it's making them happy and whatnot. But we see this, that at the expense, the cost of that is they can't be friends anymore, or they can, but they can't be, together every night bonding, right? Like there's this beautiful paragraph, I highlighted in blue, so hopefully I can find it here if you just give me a second. But there's this beautiful paragraph where he talks about their friendship, their bond, every night up at Giant's Head, which I love the name of that when they make the pun at the end about Giant's Head, right? That when John, his letter, he gives his letter, a rendition of his letter to Nicholas, and he says, meet me, you have a giant head, right? Nicholas has a giant head because he's full of knowledge and everything. This beautiful paragraph, it is a curious fact about secret meetings that a bond almost always forms among the participants, a bond that can feel both mysterious and powerful. What is more, when the participants' personalities and experiences fit together well, this bond of secrecy can transform quite naturally into real friendship. Such was the case with the boys in Violet, and all of them knew it. They could all feel it. So it was a collective, internalized understanding of their friendship, right? That's being described by Trenton Lee here, and that is, they all had it, right? It was just that Nicholas didn't have the afterthought that, once that tears apart, that it's still good. It's still good for those that, for Violet and for John, because they're happening. And they probably had some separation too, but we really only see Nicholas's, because that's the main character, that's the focus of Trenton Lee. There is so much here to unpack, and I really don't want to go on forever like I always do. So, now this is on the same page, on page 400, right? A lot of, or let's see here. Yeah. So we've got the theme of purpose bringing happiness, right? That's very clear, throughout the book. And this is the same discovery Rini has, that purpose brings happiness, right? We see this, I think, maybe in book 2, right? Where he's considering, he's reflecting on how now that he has friends, now that they have a mission, that this is what really brings him happy, makes him happy, right? And yeah, it was a plot twist, blew me away when Nicholas was like, I want to, after he talked to Mr. Harrington, he wants to go back to Child's End, right, to the manor. Now, anyway, I know I'm flipping all over the place here. This might seem kind of unorganized, but sticking to page 414, right? Just a ton of crazy stuff on here. When he's realizing how selfish he's been, right? He says, but I see it now. I see that some things are hard to do, but that you can't live with yourself if you don't do them. I see that the best way to help myself is to help the people I care about. The rest will sort itself out. It has to, right? Okay, this paragraph is the turning point. This is the climax. If we're in a literature class and it's like, okay, identify the turning point of the novel, it's these 4 lines. And this is because this is exactly what happens in the following chapters. We see everything work out for Nicholas. He first has the realization that this is how it must be done without anything in particular happening to him other than Mr. Harrington, right? And then we see kind of for the rest of the novel, everything working itself out. First, that he uncovers the evidence from Mr. Furrow that Miss Rothschild was indeed a good person. She was generous and selfless, and that wasn't all just a bunch of exaggeration, autobiographical or biographical exaggeration for the point of making a diary more entertaining or a husband feel better about himself towards his wife, right? But then we see a list of the things that Nicholas realizes, right, that can help others and therefore kind of prompt him up a little bit, right? We see the first thing, that the orphanage farm could borrow Mr. Hopefield's tractor. In exchange, Mr. Hopefield would receive help in his fields from a rotating group of older children. So work on the farm. Violet leaves the farm, other children take over. Mr. Hopefield is more profitable. That money can be used to fund Violet's art school, right? So that's the first. He takes Violet right out of the way, right? Then additional chickens for the farm. So the eggs could be used for that one guy that was complaining about eggs at the train station. And then the watchdog, having the mule, having Rabbit be used as the other guy that was complaining about his wife saying she doesn't like dogs. So that's 3. And then repair the extra equipment in the basement so it could be sold. Keeping the bicycle-powered phonograph for the kids for exercise and for dancing. relocating the girls' dormitory so they could sleep at night. Um, and so a couple things here. I wrote that Nicholas doesn't realize the amount of sacrifices he made just to be speaking to Mr. Collum like this and gaining all this leverage over Mr. Collum by asking him to do all these things. And Mr. Collum is just like mesmerized, and he's just listening intently, and he's not interrupting him. He's not saying he's, speak right to me or whatever, as he does throughout the novel, because Nicholas himself made a lot of sacrifices, a lot of brave things that he did, throughout the novel just to get to this point. And these are sacrifices he didn't necessarily make for others, but they were still things he made that a lot of calculated risks that would have been a risk to himself, right? For the things that he needed. So he doesn't even realize that up to this point. And then I have that, when after he lists out, he also talks about relocating not just the girls' rooms, but school, so it's not hot and the kids can focus. Mr. Collum asks Nicholas the same thinking that Nicholas asked Samuel Harrington. Okay, you are going to do all these things for me, Nicholas. What do you want in return? Right? And so Mr. Collum is engaging in the same thinking that Nicholas was engaged in with Samuel Harrington, because that's all Nicholas thinks about up until Mr. Harrington, is that everybody has an ulterior motive. Everybody has, I'll do all these things for you, and then you're going to do this for me in return. That's how Nicholas operates. So now that's how Mr. Collum operates, right? We see the director himself stoop to the level where Nicholas was before he met Samuel Harrington, before he met somebody decent. So I have a theory that Mr. Collum, was an orphan himself. And that, or if not an orphan, he was abused or neglected. And he's not the kind of villain, nowhere near the kind of villain Mr. Curtin is, or Crawlings. He's not, the spiders are really the villains in this novel, the bullies, although they turn around too. But Mr. Collum, I think he personally, he's asking question, Nick, what do you want for yourself? So he's always, and this is probably why he's so stern and he doesn't love kids. Nicholas makes that observation. I wonder why Mr. Collum he can't get along with kids. He's doing all these different things and saying all these different things. There's specific examples of that, but I don't want to go into that right now. And so my theory is that Mr. Collum himself was an orphan. And he just never saw he never ran into a Samuel Harrington. He is running into Nicholas Benedict, who is now saying how he wants to live. He wants to live like Samuel Harrington. So he is running into Samuel Harrington now as Nicholas Benedict, but he didn't run into anyone like that before. And so the same effect, right? What Samuel Harrington, the effect he had on Nicholas Benedict is now having on Mr. Collum. So a really interesting parallel there that Trenton's setting up. So there's that. And there's so many loose ends that Trenton clears up at the end. I really think this novel is written really well. The treasure then is the books in the library. This is the crazy thing. The treasure is the knowledge. So there's the treasure, there's the metaphorical treasure that Nicholas realizes, which is not having the treasure at all, but finding joy and purpose and purpose in sacrificing oneself for others. But then there's the actual treasure, what he finds the Rothschild's inheritance to be, which is the books in the library, right? The library itself. And I think I feel richer than any amount of money could have made me feel. Is what Nicholas says in his realization that the books, that the library was the inheritance, and that it was hiding in plain sight, just like the purloined letter, right? That there was a reference to earlier. So that's a really, really nice ending. I referenced this earlier, but John says, "See you soon, giant head." I knew you'd understand. That's where Giant's Head comes from, right? Their meeting place, right? The name is that because he had a giant head, right? And and again, we see in these chapters everything ends up working out for Nicholas, right? Violet adopts John, right? And Mr. Collum grows to like Nicholas more, and everything works out for the manor. And then John is actually not leaving forever. Violet is is staying to help her family instead of going to art school. So they end up being able to stay friends, and nobody's leaving, right? And everything that Nicholas wants works out for him. It just doesn't work out the way he thinks initially. It takes a second for him to kind of realize things figure themselves out on his own, but he's got to first realize for himself the truth of the matter. And this is exactly, when I go to church and the pastor is talking about, we don't do, it's not our own understanding, but God's understanding. It's not our own timing, but God's timing. That's sort of what that idea relates to. It's a very spiritual idea where we kind of wrest control, we surrender control, we surrender our way of doing things, and then things just kind of work themselves out. And a lot of times we get what we want, but again, not in the way that we think it's going to happen. And so we got to kind of let that go, and then it ends up just coming back, right? Nothing's easy, Nicholas thought, sneaking glances at his friends who were themselves serving more pie, but some things help. So again, this very mature treatment that Trenton Lee has throughout this series where, there's not really a quick escape. There's not really an instant fix, but there's some things that help get through the difficult parts of life. And then, the novel sort of ends, he goes further, right? After the things for the manor, he goes further, and his eighth mode of helping others and realizing that he can sacrifice for himself is reaching out to the spiders, reaching out to his enemy, right? Reaching out to his enemies. And again, that's just like, when Jesus says, like, turn the other cheek, love your enemies, right? That's sort of, I'm not saying, again, I'm not trying to read the Bible into this. It's a kid's novel. I don't know if Trenton Lee Stewart's religious, but it is a sort of universal theme. Nicholas is going even further. Now he's not just trying to leverage Mr. Collum. He's trying to leverage the spiders, right? He can now outsmart the spiders, right? This is another example of things already working out for him, right? That he had a fear before that he wouldn't be able to live and survive at the manor because the spiders were always going to bully him. And now he's at a point, right, after making that realization and after saying things are just going to work out, right, the way they just have to, that he has control over the spiders and the bullies, and he kind of makes them stop. And he just is this sort of one-man band that just changes the whole thing of the manor. He keeps the manor running, right? Again, the whole point of keeping the manor running was so that it didn't close down and the kids get moved to an orphanage that could be worse. It could be better, but an orphanage that probably was worse than the manor. And that was him thinking about the kids when he made all of those decisions and told all those things to Mr. Collum. And now he's going even further, going to his enemies, going to the spiders and saying, Iggy, I can help you with your math. Or Iggy, I can help you with your spelling. And Moray, I can help you with your math, So really, really beautiful. Gertrude hugs him at the end. Really, really, I cried a little bit there. That was cute. And that wonderful and amazing people would one day be drawn to him like metal to a magnet, that together with Nicholas, they would form an unusual kind of family. And that's, of course, prequeling, setting up the three first novels that were published to write the sequels. I guess this is the prequel. I like on the last page, with one finger, he began tracing rectangles in the plaid pattern, once again imagining them as doors and thinking his way through them. Really nice touch when it comes to the green plaid. I would have wore green plaid for this book, but I don't have any green plaid, and I wanted to make this video and get it out of the way. There's so many other things in this book. I mean, the fact that we learn early on that Nicholas is, he is a combination of all four characters, of Sticky, Constance, Kate, and Renee. He's got Renee's observational prowess and prudence and judgment when it comes to judging different people and what they do. He has Sticky's memory, photographic memory, and just vast knowledge of reading and love of reading. He's like Rini in that he uses books to escape. That's something that I relate to reading this series. This is why, I'm on this journey of loneliness right now, the season of loneliness, and on this journey of getting back into reading to replace scrolling and not to look at my phone or watch TV and movies, but to mainly get most of my entertainment from, if not from nonfiction, from fictional books. And that, okay, if I'm going to escape into a world away from the world I have and know, it's going to be in the world of books, right? And that's exactly what Rini does, and that's exactly what Mr. Benedict does, and that's why this is such a great series to get started. And this series also makes me feel sort of renewing and refreshing. It makes me feel grateful that I have parents, that I'm not going through these crazy things these orphans are going through. This series being very heavy on orphanage, it really makes you want to like help orphans. And it's gifted orphans in the case of the main characters, but orphans nonetheless. We see a lot of sad and disturbing things that happen at the manor to these orphans in this book. The sleepiness, the dunce cap, the Miss Candace giving them like these drugs that don't do anything and just give them all these side effects. It's a really dark world that Nicholas is entering, but he's the light at the end of the tunnel, anyway, there's so much to cover. He has Kate's resourcefulness and optimism. He has Constance's rhyme. He has the ability to rhyme like Constance, but he also has that pattern prediction. That's why he conjures things. That's why he prefers to remain mysterious, and that beautifully sets up the society being mysterious, right? This book's very well written, great story. And again, it's sort of like he was thinking about himself the whole time with the treasure, with escape, and taking advantage of his skills. And then at the end, he's like, that none of this is going to happen without him realizing or recognizing his selfishness and recognizing that it needs to change and he needs to sacrifice himself for others. So there is so much more in this book. I mean, there's the whole discussion about, again, parents and whether or not it was good to have them at one point and then not have them or not have them at all. There is, just look at my commonplace notes here. There is a discussion there's Nicholas Benedict overthinking like Rini, right? He's how should I proceed then? He plotted any number of different strategies in his head. So Trenton Lee's really good at writing from the outside about characters on the inside that overthink. And I'm, as an overthinker myself, it's very comforting that there is insight into describing how the mind works, even in the case of a 9-year-old. There's a idea that when we do it, if we do adopt, if we really care about adoption, we're really moved to adopt children. We're called, or I think maybe Trenton's calling us to go after those that are ugly, to go after those that are less likely to get adopted because of the way they look or because of the complications they may have, right? And we see this, of course, with Nicholas. He has a long nose, he has narcolepsy, right? He has these things that would make parents, I don't want to have to deal with that. But those are the kids that need adopting, because all the other kids that are nice looking and have no issues, not all of them are going to get adopted, but they're probably more likely to, right? So if we're thinking about adopting a child and loving a child, let's go after the ugly ones. Let's go after the ones with the conditions. Let's go after the ones that suffer, because those are the ones that are probably less likely to get adopted, right? Those are the ones that are just going to be in foster care homes forever and never be loved and never be cared for and always be overlooked by society. And we saw that with Constance, right, in the library in the last book, and we see that with Nicholas, right? So, and with all the other orphans. So that's also worth mentioning. And then there's page 117. This is another just amazing quote, especially for a kid's novel. It's this mature treatment that there's no escape. It's just existing and persisting. Then we have his refuge in books, right? I already talked about that. We talked about how he, how he characterizes how Mr. Rothschild writes about his wife. So there's so much more in here that I could explain. We're already at 40, going on 40 minutes here. But this book is just, there's so many lessons. There's so many things to think about. We didn't even get into, Violet and her whole thing. I mean, like we said, she sacrificed for her family. Um, then there's a whole like thing about evil people. There's sort of a mini case study on evil when it comes to like the miners. Um, mining in Violet's, in the back of Violet's farm and all of that. I mean, there's so much. I also wanted to say that the just to wrap up, the manor is called. I love Trenton Lee because all of his names are in some way representative or symbolic of the things the characters are. Some are more humorous than others, right? With like no Captain No Land in the second book. And there's others in this book. But I really like how, and we already know about Giant's Head, right? Because Nicholas founded that, and he has a giant head, right? I really like how the manor is called Child's End, right? So there's three things to that title. First, it's the Rothschild's Manor, right? They made it. It was an orphanage that they funded for charity, right? We also find out that the library, the Stonetown Library, was another part of their inheritance, and then of course the books in the library of the manor itself being the treasure, right? And so it's the Rothschild's end, right? It's their end, right? Right before they die, this is their last contribution to humanity, right? For all their wealth, they found the manor, they found the library, and the library within the manor, right? So it's their end, right? The Rothschild's end, but it's also Child's End. Nicholas is a child. This is a coming of age novel, and it's the end of his childhood. He's given, how bad of a place it is throughout the book, right? His childhood and all of the children. That's my third thing. That's the third reason it's called Child's End, is because all of the children's childhood is ending because they have to work with dangerous tools and eat very, very like soup that's so hot that it burns your fingers off, and be subject to a doctor that only has one medicine that gives you diarrhea and doesn't actually do anything for you whenever you're sick, and deal with bullies that are not watched, or that all the staff members minus Mr. Collum are oblivious to and are not watched after, right? And they have to do all these crazy, dangerous things as kids. Their childhood's over. So there's that. And then there's Child's End because it's the Rothschilds' last contributions, and then it's Nicholas's end of his childhood because he's growing up and he's realizing, as children we're selfish. As children, from as soon as we get into the crib, right? And mom comes out and gives us milk, and we complain, and mom does this, and dad does this, and that's childhood. It's me, 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 me. And then we grow into adulthood when we realize that true satisfaction comes when we sacrifice ourselves and give to others. And that's what Nicholas realizes. Mr. Sam Harrington is the first adult, you could say first real adult. That's why he says in that paragraph, not just adult, but real adult, right? As opposed to fake adults who are really children, but are just grown up, right? That's sort of, I think, the distinction that Nicholas is implying. And so calling the manor Child's End for this third reason, that it's the end of Nicholas's childhood and Nicholas's adulthood. And for Trenton Lee Stewart, what is the turning point from childhood to adulthood? It's recognizing that joy is in purpose, and recognizing that purpose is in serving others at the expense of oneself, even if others don't thank you back. And this is something I'm currently struggling with. I can't begin to explain how much I'm struggling with it, but the fact that it's being reminded to me by a book that I read 10 years ago and loved 10 years ago, but barely remembered, and picked up again in starting my reading journey, it couldn't be more perfect timing. And with that is my fourth and final reflection on the Mysterious Benedict Society series. Thank you.